What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music, and today I wanted to talk about J Dilla or JD solo projects. Doing a little bit of rummaging around on YouTube, I noticed that nobody had really ranked any of J Dilla's solo albums. So I figured now was as good a time as any to talk about the solo albums that JD released. And funnily enough, he really, from what I could tell, only released 5 solo projects under his name. So I figured now would be as good a time as any to go through and talk about each record and rank them worst to best. So, a few stipulations about this list. I'm sticking only to records that the man worked on. So, any of the posthumously released records that were put out and collected after his passing, I will not be talking about those. Also, I'm sticking strictly to records that have the name J Dilla or JD on them. So you will not be seeing any Slum Village or any of his other production work on here, simply to try to keep this list as brief as possible. Last thing, and I don't know why this needs to be stressed anytime somebody does a video like this, these are my opinions and my opinions alone. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Please tell me down in the comments. Love hearing from you guys. The last thing I do want to say is I'm not really going to go into too much of the J Dilla history. Honestly, I feel like there's a lot of videos on YouTube that already do that way better than I possibly could. And if you want to check out any of the documentaries about J Dilla that I recommend, I will post some links in my Steemit and WordPress blogs for you to check out. Links for those blogs are always down in the description. So yeah, with that little introduction aside, let's get into what I think is the worst of all the J Dilla solo projects. Of all of J Dilla's solo projects, I have to say that The Diary of J Dilla is by far the worst of all of J Dilla's solo projects. And it's kind of sad because this was a record that was supposed to come out all the way back in 2001. This is the infamous MCA album, and we finally, after years of it being caught in major label limbo, we finally got our hands on it all the way back in 2016. And the results were kind of mixed. One of the main issues for me with this record is the majority of the production on here isn't handled by J Dilla. While he doesn't list a lot of top tier producers like DJ Scratch, Pete Rock, Knots, and Madlib all make contributions to this record, their contributions just still don't stack up to the J Dilla produced tracks. The tracks that are produced by J Dilla himself really stand out. Tracks like Give 'Em What They Want or Fuck the Police all are some of the biggest highlight moments on here. And that's not to say that the people handling the production on this record are slouches. Some of the tracks like Diamonds, parts 1 and 2, the introduction, which it has production handled by House Shoes, are actually some really solid tracks. And they are actually some solid tracks. But since the majority of this record has production being handled by other people, it really means that the main focus of this record becomes J Dilla's rapping. I know this might be a little bit controversial and it might get me some hate on the internet. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of J Dilla's rapping. Mind you, I don't think he's the worst rapper of all time, but in general, I've never really pointed to J Dilla as saying he's one of the greatest spitters of all time. And honestly, on this record, this isn't some of the highest tier rapping that you're gonna hear on a record. I have to say, as a sort of historic album, it is worth checking out, and despite the fact that Dilla is not that great of a rapper, I still think that this record is worth listening to. Between tracks like Give 'Em What They Want and Fuck the Police and The Diary, the introduction, The Shining, Diamonds, all are solid tracks and are all definitely worth listening. But in comparison to the other records that J Dilla released as a solo artist, this is easily the weakest of the bunch. Still good, just not as good as the other records that he put out. Coming in at number 4, we got the J Dilla Rough Draft EP. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking about the Stones Throw 2007 reissue and not the original release of this record because I don't own a copy of it, and this is the one that I'm most familiar with. So in terms of the sort of lineage of of the JD timeline. This record came out as a result of his MCA album being caught in major label limbo. Him getting frustrated, he went to, I think, a German-based label to be able to put this out, and the result of that record was something that was really raw, and it sounded like it was
get straight from the motherfucking cassette.
Yeah, I mean, he just said it for you right there. And the result of the record is some of the loosest, some of the heaviest material J Dilla ever released. There's not any shine to this record. It's gritty, it's rough, it's got a lot of really hard drums on it, and you can really get a sense of some irritation and frustration with J Dilla's seemingly a little bit more aggressive delivery on this record. Overall, it really shows off a wide variety of J Dilla's production. Some of the stuff shows off some of the more electronic sounds that he was starting to introduce into his productions, and the drums are really hard on a lot of tracks on here. In terms of highlights from this record, I like songs like Make 'Em Envy and Crushing. I actually like the censored version of the song more than the unedited version of the song, but that's just me. I feel like the little extra punctuation that comes from the censored version of the record just actually makes it a little bit funnier, but that's just me. And overall, it's a solid project. I think where the record sort of loses me is the fact that the record's sort of bogged down with so many interludes. If you count all the interludes on this record, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different interludes. Some of them were shout outs to different artists, some of them had just random phone calls to J Dilla using his answering machine, and they really just don't add that much to the record. And since J Dilla's rapping is also once again on display on this record, while I do think he does a better job here than he does on The Diary, I honestly still think that hearing these beats speak for themselves probably wouldn't have harmed this record in any way, shape, or form, because the production on here is absolutely fantastic. The raps in general on here are some of his better solo project raps. I still don't think that they're all that amazing, but I still feel like this is a good project, and I feel like it's worth checking out. That's why, despite the fact that I did call this the worst to best list, it's still solid, it's still worth listening to, and if you've never listened to J Dilla's Rough Draft EP, definitely check this one out. Coming in at number 3, we got J Dilla, The Shining. This kind of fits within the framework of what I was talking about, since it technically was released posthumously, but it was a record that J Dilla had a hand in himself. He was working on it up until his untimely death in February of 2006. It was after his passing that Kareem Riggins, a producer, drummer, and friend of J Dilla, went in and finished up the record, and as far as I could tell, the record was 75% done, and Kareem Riggins went in and tweaked some stuff to make this a full project. And as a full project, this is an excellent record. In many ways, it was meant to be a follow-up to his first solo record, Welcome to Detroit. We'll get to this guy in a minute. So it features a lot of J Dilla's production, as well as a lot of J Dilla's friends, people such as Busta Rhymes, Common, Pharoah Monch, Madlib, D'Angelo, MED, Guilty Simpson, J-Rock, Kareem Riggins, Dwelle, and Black Thought all make appearances on this record. And in terms of the performances of the guest artists on here, they all do a pretty good job. Nothing too flashy, and definitely nothing too jaw-dropping, but the performances here are really, really solid. I specifically like D'Angelo on the track So Far to Go, and I think he really adds to the sort of emotional power of the song. Common kind of creeps me out a little bit on that song, and it gets a little bit too graphic, but that's more of a criticism for Common rather than the record. Like I said, the performances on here are really good. Black Thought does a great job on the track Love Movin'. I really like Dwelle's more neo-soul, more mellow jam dime piece. I like the 2 instrumental tracks, specifically Body Moving with J-Rock and Kareem Riggins. I think that's one of the harder hitting instrumentals on on here. And actually one of my favorite tracks on here is Baby with Madlib and Guilty Simpson. Just the chops that J Dilla uses on that song are just absolutely amazing. And it really fits in line with a lot of the production that he was doing with Donuts. And as far as I know, this record and this record right here were being made at the exact same time. So you can see that the influence of the music that he was making on this record shows up here. And it also shows up because of some of the tracks on this record were actually used on, also show up on Donuts. Overall, I think this is a solid project. It's a bit too short. I really don't like Busta Rhymes' track on here all that much. It's kind of one of the weaker songs. And I'm honestly not that big of a fan of Guilty Simpson. I think he's all right on this song. He also did a pretty good job on the track that he was featured on in the Rough Draft EP, which I forgot to mention. I'm just honestly not a big fan of him, although I do like the instrumental for the track that he shows up on, Jungle Love. J Dilla's production on here is absolutely solid, and I really like this record. If you're looking for a good J Dilla record to listen with a lot of people rhyming over his beats in one album, this is a good one to start with. There's a lot of really cool tracks on here. There's some good performances, and I recommend this one. So that's why this one sits squarely in the middle of the pack for me. Coming in at number 2, we got this record. This is Welcome to Detroit, released on BBE Records back in 2001, I want to say. This record is, from my understanding, JD's first solo project. He had left Slum Village to pursue work as a major label artist, and this record actually sort of fits within that gap of graduating from Slum Village to being a solo artist to being a producer for a major label. And it really shows JD at one of his first creative peaks in terms of taking the sound that he had already built for himself through the Slum Village albums, that boom bappy, post Pete rock, drunk drums that he was known for stuff on Slum Village and Far Side and A Tribe Called Quest, and really moving it to the next level. And the progression to this record is really kind of interesting because I think when people generally think of J Dilla's sound that most people try to copy, this is the record that they think of. So as a result, you get a lot of drunk drums on here, you get a lot of swing heavy tracks, you get some really crispy snares with some nice hard-hitting kicks as well. And really, this record is probably, in my opinion, the record that most people pull from when they talk about JD Productions. In terms of the raps on here, J Dilla does a pretty decent job, but he's often outshone by some of his friends that he brings on. Specifically featuring Fat Cat is one of the best tracks on here. Not only does it have an amazing beat, but it also has a fantastic performance from Fat Cat. That track right there is reason alone to pick this up. But another reason to check this record out, and one thing that I think is really cool about this record, is it really showed off J Dilla stretching out as a music producer at the same time. Tracks like his cover of Think Twice have become an absolute classic, and also tracks like Rico Suave Bossa Nova is, honest to God, one of my favorite J Dilla tracks. I really like the vibe that he goes for on that. I'm also a fan of another track that he did, African Rhythms, which sort of has him exploring a sort of Afro-funk or Afro-jazz sort of sound with the rhythms that he's playing around with. These are both two short little interlude tracks, but I do like them and I think they're really cool. As much as I really like this record, it is not a completely perfect record. There are definitely some weaker moments on here. I'm not a big fan of Big Booty Express, and there are a few moments on here that just aren't as memorable as the rest of the record. However, I do think if you are going to pick up a JD solo project, this is the one to get. I can't recommend this one enough. There are definitely enough highlight tracks on here, specifically featuring Fat Cat. Seriously, check that one out. That this would be my second highest recommendation for a J Dilla solo record. That means there's still one record left that I haven't talked about yet. For my number one pick, come on, don't act surprised. Yeah, it had to be Donuts. A record so good that I actually own not one, not two, I actually own 3 copies of this record. My CD of it is all the way back in the States, so I don't have it with me. But come on, I bought this on 7-inch and I bought it on LP. I probably would buy this record again. I almost bought it when they re-released the record with the J Dilla picture on the front, but I just never picked it up. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this record at this point. This record is legendary, and for good reason. It is one of the defining works of J Dilla. The way that he chopped samples on this record is absolutely insane, and people are still copying this style to this day. This album is littered with highlights. There's so many good tracks on here. I'm not going to even go into it. I'm just going to tell you to go out and listen to this record in its entirety for yourself, because it's just that good. And there's just so much history about it that I could probably spend an entire video talking about this record. Might actually end up working on that. So I'm gonna keep my praise for this record really, really short. I know there are a ton of videos out there that have probably talked about this record to death, but yeah, when it comes to the best of J Dilla solo projects, this is the one to pick up. J Dilla Donuts. If you don't have this in your collection, slap yourself in the face. This is the best J Dilla solo project of all time. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you listened to any of the records that I talked about in this video, please let me know what you thought about them down in the comments below. What are some of your favorite J Dilla songs? I'd love to hear from you guys. And what are some of your favorite J Dilla songs from the records that I talked about in this video? If you want to check these records out for yourself, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs. That's where I will post audio links for you to check them out. And please head over to my Mixcloud account. That way you can check out the audio component of this YouTube channel, where I will be playing J Dilla tracks as well as a whole assortment of other kinds of music. Links for everything, as always, is down in the description. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Until then, peace out!